Hello, and welcome to the module, The Art of Collaboration, Strategies to Facilitate Student Engagement and Deeper Learning. My name is Leslie Zaroya, and I'm a Reading Language Arts Consultant here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Today we'll take a look at this notion of collaboration, what it is and how it relates to cooperative learning. We'll look at why it is such a critical skill in Common Core instruction. Next, we'll look at what I consider to be the most important piece of collaboration, the teacher's role, and what teachers can do to have successful collaborative structures in their classrooms. And finally, we'll look at some specific strategies and protocols available to teachers to build a collaborative culture and get students thinking deeply. First, let's think about the notion of collaboration as it pertains to classroom instruction. Essentially, collaboration means to work together to complete a task and achieve shared goals, capitalizing on one another's resources and skills. Whenever I hear this word in this context, I think sort of naturally about cooperative learning. Students grouped in sets of 4, and each one fulfilling an assigned role to come up with a group presentation or project. And this is certainly an example of a type of collaboration. But when we think of what the Common Core State Standards asks of students in terms of engaging in collaborative discourse with multiple and diverse partners, what it's really getting at is the ability to examine and question and debate and discuss ideas, not necessarily to come up with a group product or outcome, which is what we might consider the role of cooperative learning. It's more to hone that ability to think deeply about an idea or piece of text and articulate your ideas to others, and then both give and get feedback that can also be considered and digested. So while collaboration may in fact still be working together to complete a task, that task is not necessarily a group product with one definitive answer. Let's listen as one teacher describes collaboration in his classroom. Here's David Alio, a high school English teacher, discussing the difference between collaboration and cooperative learning in his classroom.
I think we're good to go, right? We're ready to do some collaborating today. Collaboration is something I deeply believe in. Students really learn most deeply and mostly from their peers. And as a result, I need to be able to help them learn how to do that in an academic environment. So we will spend a lot of the year working on specific strategies to be able to collaborate.
Oh, so that's what you meant. It was, I guess.
It's not cooperative learning, because cooperative learning typically is looking for one end product, one project, and we can all kind of work toward that.
Right.
Collaboration is very different. Collaboration asks students to examine, asks students to pull apart, reassemble, and come up with something new, but not necessarily by consensus. That individuals bring their own perspectives and ideas into a group where that idea then is kind of put into the hopper, wrestled with, and then each student emerges with some new idea of their own.
A theme that's emerging is that maybe it was her pride that alienated her.
If I have 24 students in my class, there will be 24 different ideas that leave that classroom. The value of having 24 different points of view is being able to see multiple perspectives. In the classroom, we really need to be able to handle contradiction, ambiguity.
The first sentence, you said it was to the point and direct. You said that, but he said that it was broad, so I didn't really know what to think about that.
Individual students need to feel empowered to examine an idea by testing it by other students, strengthening it, and then leaving with a stronger idea.
But I didn't even realize that using just like a transition word could completely reshape this.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Collaboration is not a consensus driving device. It's a way for people to problem solve, and it's an environment for them to be able to engage in productive thinking and learning. So keep going, all right? You're doing a great job.
Feel free to stop here for a bit and discuss what you saw on the video. I'll continue with this. I really like the way Mr. Alio frames the notion of collaboration in his classroom. He sees one of his main jobs as training students in how to have collaborative discussions so they can develop and craft their own ideas. His firm belief that students learn most from their peers is sort of earth-shattering if we really think about it. This is not a philosophy that has shaped traditional instruction. I would say that most of us believe that students learn most from a qualified teacher. That's why most instruction is basically teacher-driven. So if we say then that students do, in fact, learn most from their peers, it changes the game. Interesting, huh? Well, what I would say is that yes, I agree that we all learn greatly from our peers, especially in the sense of debriefing and processing ideas and questions. And yes, a qualified teacher who has great facilitation skills is critical as well. It's that balance that makes it work. As we mentioned, Common Core standards place emphasis on not only acquiring content knowledge, coming prepared, having read, and citing evidence, but also on this processing piece of having academic discourse in a variety of configurations and practicing the sharing of ideas for the purpose of strengthening and deepening your own. I find this interesting because it is getting at the ability to shape ideas, get input from others that both supports and negates your ideas, and coming through having retooled and solidified your own thinking. In light of the fact that our world is so within range, smaller, right there at our keyboards, if you will, because of technology and social media and the millions of messages kids are both seeing and delivering, this ability to sift through content and ideas and discuss them and emerge with new ones is pretty imperative. There's simply a lot going on out there, and it's not enough to sit back and absorb from the world. One must really have opportunity to process in order to make sense of it. And let's face it, the truth is that it is much more engaging and fun and exhilarating to be an active learner than a passive one. How many classes have you been in where a third of the kids have their heads down on the desk and are checked out? Effective collaborative structures do not allow for passivity. Students must perk up, step up, and demonstrate their ideas. And we also know that collaboration is kind of messy and scary and exhausting and can be a frustrating free-for-all mess, right? The key is in how it is all approached in the classroom. Which leads us to the most important role in all of this, the teacher. One would think, or maybe even argue, that the students are the critical factor in collaboration. They are the ones doing the collaborating, right? I say no. The teacher is the key to success as a guide on the side, facilitator, encourager, and redirector. Where collaboration sometimes circles the drain is in situations where the teacher has not been able to get a handle on their role in the process. They are still the sage on the stage instead of the guide on the side. So how does a teacher assume this facilitating role then? Well, as in most things in the classroom, it comes down to a few key preparations on the part of the teacher. Let's look at 4 areas: clear objectives and goals, modeling and pre-teaching discussion norms and protocols, active listening and monitoring, and time for reflection and debriefing. First, as with any lesson, having a clear objective and goals for the discussion is imperative. Students need to know what the outcome is and why they're engaging in the discussion in the first place. Recently, I sat in a classroom where the teacher said to me, "Come on in, we're having a discussion about our main character." So I did, and I proceeded to watch the teacher discuss the character and the kids sit and doodle on papers in front of them. I leaned over to one of the kids and asked what was going on, what was the point of the lesson, and he shrugged and said, "I have no idea." Afterwards, I asked the teacher, "How'd you think the discussion went?" He said, "Well, I think they really understood about the main character." And I said, "Why is that? What gives you that impression?" And he said, "Well, no one had any questions, so I think they got it." Well, somebody got something, but I'm not sure what it was. Some teachers say that they're going to have a discussion in class about this or that, and what ends up happening is that they do all of the talking, and one or two kids chimes in, and voila, discussion completed. Collaborative structures in the world of Common Core instruction are completely different than this model. The model here is for the students to do 95% of the talking with one another, and for the teacher to facilitate from the side. But without a clear direction of the objective and goals, students will not know what to discuss or how to discuss it. So the first step is to clearly state for students a concrete objective, such as, today we're going to examine evidence to support or refute why the main character may be insane. Your goal is to hear multiple perspectives from your group members and choose a stance. We'll start in groups of 4, switch groups once, and then do the philosophical chairs protocol to see where everyone is landing. By being clear about what we are doing and why we are doing it, sets the process up for students to be successful. All right, so the other big job of the teacher, beyond clear objectives and goals, is in modeling and pre-teaching how to actually have that discussion. The reason that many class discussions go awry and become frustrating and exhausting is because students do not understand and follow agreed rules and roles for collaborative structures. And this is something the teacher needs to explicitly teach and evaluate. Let me explain. The first item is norms for behavior. Students absolutely must feel safe in a collaborative setting to share ideas and question freely. Safety is only established through a culture that follows explicit norms and teaches acceptable language, academic scaffolds, and sentence starters and protocols for disagreeing. Teachers who skip this piece will struggle so much more in trying to run effective discussions. It's tempting, especially with older students, to sort of rationalize it and say, well, they're old enough, they should know how to talk about things and share perspectives. This is a huge mistake, and a suicide, as my friend always said, that can get you off on a very bad foot that is hard to then backtrack and sort out. Role-playing and modeling both appropriate and inappropriate behavior is time that is well spent and pays off hugely in the long run. Next is teaching the actual discussion protocols, the format and structure of how the discussion will be handled and debriefed. Sometimes it is informal, but often a format like Fishbowl or a Socratic seminar is really useful in deconstructing and constructing ideas and theories. So as a class, we'd have to look at the protocol and practice it so we can stop and discuss the process and how it's working. I like to use a silly topic to do this, one that requires no heavy content knowledge. Something like Facebook versus Twitter, which is the better platform for sharing information about a fundraiser. Or TV dramas and reality shows, which portrays real life most accurately. Something fun and that no one gets too hotly invested in. The goal is to have fun while teaching the process and structure of the protocol. Then debriefing to see what we did well and what we could improve on next time. All right, so the next key thing is to make sure that students are academically prepared to do the discussion. So let's say they know how to do the structure, but do they have material to adequately discuss? I'd argue that the number one reason kids don't participate in a discussion is because they feel they have nothing to say. Preparation is pivotal. If students have read and understood the material and worked through notes or prompts, done a close reading, or engaged in some processing activity, they should be well prepared to talk about what their ideas are. I love this graphic. I chose it because it reminds us to be a little zen. Try to resist the urge to jump in and fix everything. This is so hard because a lot of us are sort of fixers and nurturers, and we tend to want to jump in and rescue when it gets tough. Instead, think of yourself as the Zen master. Your job is to listen carefully, pose new questions, redirect the conversation when it gets off task. We have to become comfortable with students' struggle. It's okay if they don't know or get confused by things. Our job is not to tell them the quote-unquote answer. Our job is to help them work through ideas, present evidence, deal with counterclaims, and process. If we jump in every time and give the answers, it basically tells them that we think they aren't capable of coming to it on their own, and that the discussion they just had is useless. And finally, the last part of the teacher's role is to provide space and opportunity for reflection and debriefing of both the process and the content. If we take a moment to look at the content, what was shared, how your ideas changed, were supported, shot down, evolving, etc., it shows students we value the work they just engaged in and the ideas of others. If we look at the process, what worked well, who dominated the conversation, how well norms were followed, we show students that we monitor ourselves and each other to ensure we get the best possible outcome from the process. Reflection is something that all humans should be doing more often. If we really take a minute to look at ourselves and how we are doing and how we can grow, wouldn't we all be better for it? It's the same with school. When we stop, reflect, and adapt, it holds us all accountable and creates a culture where we do our best and learn from experiences. Okay, yada yada, I know. Let's watch a short clip of a 5th grade classroom. Watch for how the teacher sets up the process. Note what she does explicitly.
So after we do the small group brainstorm, I ask them to come prepared for text talk time. And text talk time is a discussion structure that I created in order to give the kids an opportunity to talk about a text that we had been reading during the week. It's an opportunity for them to call the shots and to discuss what they were thinking when they read the text. And it's also an opportunity for me to ask questions that challenge them and that I'll later expect them to respond to in writing.
Before we get started, I want to go over the expectations like we do every single time. One person speaks at a time. And lately, remember, we've been kind of talking about how sometimes we get excited and we all start joining in and blurting out, and that's okay every once in a while. That happens in normal conversation. But we just remember that if I call for the 0 noise signal, that we're all gonna come back as a group and hear one person. Listen carefully to the speaker, right? You don't know if you're adding something if you're not listening to what someone else said, right? So you need to listen carefully. And use hand signals. So 2 fingers if you have something to add onto what somebody has already said, and thumbs up if you have something new to say.
I use a strategy of hand signals in order to promote active listening. I also use hand signals to help me facilitate the conversation.
Oh wow, lots of thinking.
This strategy has been really effective because raising your hand wasn't enough. It gives students an opportunity to show me that they have something to say.
Phineas, you have something new to say, looks like. Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Pose them to the group.
Okay, so the first one is, what happened to the ship after they left? The ship that was gonna come and they waited?
Can we go to that part? Do you know what page it said that on so we can?
I think Well, we heard that in the beginning that...
For the first 20 minutes of the conversation, I'm just choosing students and trying to give turns to an equal number of students from different parts of the circle. I'm the facilitator in this discussion.
You may want to pause here and discuss what elements of effective facilitation you saw so far. Here's a few highlights that I noticed. I like how she immediately reviewed the expectations and behaviors for the discussion. It sounds like she begins this way each time. Also, she gave them specific hand signals to use to tell the kind of comment that students wanted to make, so she could better facilitate. And when the boy said he had 2 questions, she immediately redirected them to the group and didn't try to answer them. It reinforced that this is their time to make sense of the reading. And lastly, she steered them right back to the text so that the discussion could be anchored in the reading. Okay, so speaking of that, let's look at some strategies that teachers can use in collaborative discussions. Take a look at the handout that is attached to this module. I tried to compile a variety of resources here to get you going. This first page is a recap of teacher roles and responsibilities, followed by academic language scaffolds. These are good for teaching general formal English phrases. Next are specific discussion scaffolds with transition starters. I love these because it elevates the level of discourse, and students love to, as they say, sound really smart. I always laugh when I hear students say this, but it also sort of lends an academic tone to the discussion. So it's not just us all sitting around yakking, but a serious discussion with real purposes and outcomes. I'd run these on cardstock and have students use them on their desks as the discussion flows. Next in the handout is a section of strategies for pairs and small groups. These are for getting students engaged in working with others on a smaller scale and with diverse partners. It's important to do some of these regularly so that students become comfortable sharing ideas with one another before having to contribute whole group. Also, it deepens their content knowledge and the flow of ideas. I know in my work, I'm constantly wandering out of my office to find one of my go-to people to run ideas by. I am forever in need of someone to hear an idea, offer suggestions, or give feedback. It fuels me. Sometimes I don't like the idea or agree with their comments, but then it just solidifies my original thinking and I can move on. Lastly, these smaller pair and group experiences allow for the start of creating a culture where ideas are valued. Talk time is imperative. Collaboration is welcome. Otherwise, think about it. The message becomes, I do all of the talking and my ideas are most important. I don't believe teachers honestly want that to be what comes across. I know they want learning to be dynamic and collaborative. I think it's just hard to know how to begin to create that. So start small with a few of these structures. I'm sure you are familiar with Think, Pair, Share. It's super easy and it's a good one to do daily. The square part is then when each pair turns to another pair and shares ideas. Let's look at another one that is good for starting collaboration processes and the sharing of ideas. It's called passing notes. This is a 6th grade class. Watch how she uses the notes to then spur the discussion.
My name is Emily Cerrone, and I'm a 6th grade language arts teacher at Bedford Middle School, and my activity is passing notes. Passing notes for literature is a great activity that lets students think about a question from literature and then respond to it in writing, and then interact with one another and build off of each other's written ideas. Today, they did the passing notes activity based on the novel Seed Folks by Paul Fleischman. It's about a community garden that grows out of a vacant lot in inner city Cleveland. The quote I gave them today reflected on the importance of community gardens and how they can help a neighborhood. So let's read this quote together. It's also up on the board. Community gardens are oases in the urban landscape of fear, places where people safely offer trust, helpfulness, charity. Community gardens are places where people rediscover not only generosity, but the pleasure of coming together. For this activity, I printed up the quote I wanted them to discuss and I put it on lined paper so it was more like a real note. I asked them to analyze the quote or to give their ideas on the topic for the day, and I give them 5 minutes to analyze or think and write.
Gardens can help people get together and like plant together.
Good. All right. So finish your sentence. You are going to sign your name. Sixth graders love to interact with each other, and when they sign their name, they're excited to see who's going to get their note and whose note they get. I'm going to collect them and shuffle them around the room. They fold up their notes as if they were passing them to a friend in the hallway, and I collect all of the notes and quickly redistribute them around the classroom. I find it easiest to collect the notes and distribute them myself because I want to make sure that everyone's getting a note, and if I let them get up and pass to a friend, I'm afraid others might be excluded or it could take too much time or get chaotic. Before they open up the note, I usually have a guideline of how I want them to respond. You could explain your interpretation of the quote if it's different from your classmates. You can make a connection to something that happened in the book. They open up the note, they read what their classmate has written, and they respond and add on to that idea. I usually give them 3 to 5 minutes to respond to their classmate's note. After they respond to their classmate, they sign their name underneath their note. They fold it up, and one more time, I collect the notes and redistribute them around the room. I want them to act as if the note is a conversation and to keep adding and building on what's been said previously. They sign their note, they fold it up, they return the note to the original writer, and then they come back to their desk and there's a note there waiting for them. They get to read what other people had to say about their own ideas. I usually end the lesson with either having the students have the final word on their own note and they write a few sentences to bring it all together. Other times I'll ask the class for responses that stuck out to them as intriguing or unique that they wouldn't have thought of on their own.
Well, I thought it was really interesting what Josh said. I thought I had seen a lot of people write about Leona and Cy Young, but he made a point about Sam, and I thought that was really interesting because I wouldn't have thought of Sam as one of the characters.
I want students to realize that their ideas are deepened and strengthened by thoughts that their classmates have had.
Juliana wrote that Sam was trying to make people not be bothered by their past and try to fix things like in the future, and that made me think of like Marcella, because she was trying to fix. She knew that she couldn't get back her past.
I really like this activity because all of the students participate in class discussion. Every student is accountable for sharing their ideas. And it's also really nice that students' work is validated. People who maybe are shyer and don't want to share, their idea is going to be validated, which makes them feel like what they have to say really matters.
Feel free to stop and discuss here. I love this strategy, especially as sort of an intro into collaborative structures. It allows kids to test drive an idea and get feedback from a few peers and then share either what they wrote or someone else's idea. It's fun and can spur many new thoughts. It's a great catalyst to start discussion. Now I know many of you may be thinking, okay, what if they all write on the note something crappy or a snarky reply? Well, here's what I would do. I would put up several student examples and have the class evaluate the responses. Are they useful, thoughtful, articulate, kind? Do they provide more insight? Like anything, what gets monitored gets done. If you pay attention to the comments and feedback, and kids find it useful and see that others actually get their ideas, they will be serious about it. Moving on, let's look at the next section of the handout. Strategies for whole group, starting on page 13. Some are pretty standard, like equity sticks and the gallery walk. Take a look at text to assess, though. This is a fun strategy where students text a response to the smartboard or teacher computer using a website called polleverywhere.com. It's really easy to use and it's free. And what this allows the class to see is sort of a group think on an idea or a question. It can collect responses immediately and really be a springboard for discussion. Plus, it's fun and kids love texting, so why not put it to use? The Teaching Channel has a great video of this strategy. Just search it on their website using the title Text to Assess. Okay, we're winding down here, and I want to end with a video of a structured discussion protocol. There are 3 outlined in the packet, as well as a set of tools for reflection and accountability in any discussion setting, so check those out too. But for now, let's focus in on the fishbowl version of the Socratic seminar. Before we look at this final clip, there's a collaboration observation guide attached to this module that you can download to take notes on as you watch. And it's generic, so you can use it to observe any discussion and have a place to record notes. I also want to preface the video by saying that it is again a Teaching Channel video and is one of the most excellent examples of implementation of a discussion protocol that I've ever seen. She takes a serious and what could be construed as hot topic, the use of the N-word and Huck Finn, and lets them really digest and discuss it. And because of the protocol, is able to capture so much in a very structured and yet unconstrained manner. One note, it was interesting that while the class is diverse, you will see Hispanic, white, and Asian students. There are no African Americans in this particular class, so that adds a different element. Something to consider as far as the comments of the students. But what I'd ask you to do is to take a look and see what elements of facilitation and collaboration we have covered today that you see evident in the lesson. Here we go.
My name is Esther Wu. I teach 11th grade English, and today's lesson is a Socratic seminar on the N-word. We are currently studying Huckleberry Finn, and in Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain uses the N-word 200 plus times.
It still has lots of history behind it, and it still diminishes the African Americans in the community.
Students encounter this word personally in their lives.
My friends, no matter their ethnicity, I've heard different people say it.
We would not be doing Mark Twain justice if we didn't look at this word.
Because the reason Mark Twain wrote this book was to directly criticize society.
A motto that I have is whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning.
Banner, he uses it, but he says if a white person says it, he'll beat them bloody or something.
The more students talk, the more responsible that they are for their learning, the more they give each other feedback, the more they learn.
And by saying that only the black community can say it and not the white community, I think that Erin said before, that it will create more tension. Because
I see my role as helping them do the work.
I think it's also important how the person uses the N-word, say offensively.
There are 3 big roles that students have in a Socratic seminar. Every student ends up doing all 3 roles: speaker, listener, general evaluator. The speakers are the students who sit in the inner circle and they have an organic discussion around the texts.
why should some people be able to use it even though every time they say it, they run the risk of hurting someone else? Because
the coach is assigned to a specific student in the inner circle, and they are listening for the comments that students are making, the examples that they're using. Their goal is to help the student at halftime to become an even more effective speaker.
So yeah, just try to use the transition and maybe another quote.
And the general evaluators, there are actually multiple roles. The comment counter, counting how many times students are speaking.
Serafine and Megan try to voice your guys' opinions a little more about it.
The transition tracker, who's keeping track of the academic transitions that we're working on.
Aaron used a transition where he summarized the discussion. And then
a quote tracker, who's keeping notes on the quotes that are being cited.
They're kind of using the same stuff and it's kind of getting a little repetitive.
We also have a student who's doing what I call big board, who is literally keeping track of the big thematic questions and ideas in the conversation.
Honestly, the biggest one was probably if the meaning was changed, could the words be used by anyone?
Before we do our seminar, I'd like for us to do some goal setting today.
I just said I would like to see more I disagree statements with explanations as to why.
You know how we had the Oprah discussion? I think that we can connect that with what we've been, like the articles we've been reading.
The goal for the class is threefold. There's a reading goal, a speaking goal, and a listening goal. The reading goal is for students to be able to evaluate the complexity of the argument in a packet of articles that they read. Speaking, they need to contribute in a collaborative and diverse discussion with partners and to support their ideas with text. And finally, the listening goal is for students to evaluate their classmates' comments according to what they read in the text.
All right, so here we go. We've got 15 minutes to start. This is your conversation. You may use anything from our packet, as well as from the Oprah film that we watched, as well as your personal experience.
Really, most in agreement with Leonard Pitts Jr.'s article that the N-word has no place in society. I feel that it's too hurtful, and we shouldn't be using the word.
I agree with you, Drew. Even Naylor acknowledges this when she says, if the word was to disappear totally from the mouths of even the most liberal of white society, no one in that room was naive enough to believe it would disappear from white minds. Maybe it can't be reformed and therefore it should not be incorporated into our society.
Well, I have to disagree with both you and Drew because, like as Naylor said, I don't think the word is going to disappear. Like in her own family, she's starting the transition to mean like a term of endearment and like a much more nicer meaning than it used to be.
Yeah, I agree with Cannon because I can see why Drew and Aaron think that we should stop using the word altogether because it has such negative connotations with it. But just because you stop saying the word doesn't mean that those ideas won't still be around. So I think trying to change.
So during a Socratic seminar, we have halftime.
I think you should look into your article more and use that to kind of synthesize.
Find transitions here and then just use them while you're
probably
speaking.
you only talked once though, and I think that's one thing we can improve on in the next half.
So let's check in with our transition tracker.
We've used a lot of proficient transitions, mostly like I agree, disagree with this person's ideas because...
What do you recommend in terms of our getting more advanced transitions out there?
Bringing in the quotes and also pointing out more like fallacies and different arguments.
The Common Core has become a part of my teacher DNA, and it provides the blueprint for a unit where we read, we speak, we listen, we write, we work on language. And those are the four big umbrellas of the Common Core. And I really like that sequence because it makes sense for students, it is logical, and it provides a scaffolding for students to be able to produce some sort of piece of writing at the end that takes into account all the reading they've done and all the conversations that they've had in speaking and listening.
Wow. So this is when I really hate being the lone speaker in a module. There's so much to talk about here. Please stop and talk to someone about it. Maybe you'll have to pull someone in from the hall. I don't know. I don't know who you're with, but talk to someone. I've posted the link to this video right on the slide so you can go directly to the teaching channel and see all of the resources that Mrs. Wu attached to this lesson. There are articles and examples of student work. It's amazing. So just to recap a few things here, you probably noticed that Mrs. Wu did very little in the discussion. Her motto of whoever is doing the talking is doing the learning was very evident. She had clearly taught the process well, and students were able to conduct the discussion on their own. I really like the roles that she assigned, speaker, coach, and general evaluator, as well as the other various categories of comment tracker, transition tracker, quote tracker, and big board monitor. And I didn't feel like these were sort of busy work roles to keep them engaged. At the halftime break, these students shared what they had observed, and the class used this data to do better in the next round. The last piece that sort of stays with me was her comments right at the end. She mentions that the Common Core state standards have really become part of her teacher DNA. She says that they read, they speak, they listen, they write, and they work on language, and that this logical sequence is providing scaffolding for students as they sift through information and work towards outcomes. Love, love, love it. It's so good. Well, that brings us to the end of this module. I hope you found it useful. Collaboration is such an important feature of Common Core instruction, and I hope this has given you a place to grow from. Feel free to email me if you have questions or comments. Thanks for viewing, and don't forget to keep calm and continue collaborating.